Welcome to Power and Perspective. I am April. This is Aaron.
Yes, you nailed it.
Thank you. And we're here to reframe conversations with empathy and humor. Today our guest is, now I'm going to mess it up, Jennifer?
Nope.
Is she that way?
Everybody's the same direction from you always, yeah.
So she's this way?
Yeah, you only have to...
It's because...
Yeah,
I'm even looking at the screen right now. It's because the camera's flipped. Anyway, this is our guest, Jennifer, and today our conversation is about parental rights. More specifically, to do with CPS, which those of you who don't know acronyms is Child Protective Services, and DCF, which is the Department of Child and Family. What is it, Jennifer?
Department of Children and Families.
Department of Children and Families. And so, where do you want to start, Aaron?
Well, I mean, it should be noted. I'm getting feedback from myself on your mic, April.
On my...
Yeah, you can hear me from your speakers. Sorry, technical difficulties. So we'll start here. I have not a lot of context here. I mean, I have my opinions on government-run programs and all, but ultimately, I have no children, so I have no firm context in any opinion that I'm going to have as far as getting a 1-second finger.
Okay, I'm trying to fix it. Okay. I was wondering, why do I always use headphones? And now I guess we know why.
Yeah. That's why everyone always uses headphones.
I had no idea. I learned something new every day. So I actually do have some context, not a whole lot. Jennifer's going to enlighten us in like so many different ways, but I can understand with regards to the fear of CPS. So when my daughter was young, I think she was about 2, we were living with my mother-in-law who took pain pills at night for restless leg, all irrelevant. But she cut the pills in half. One of the halves must have got away and was on the floor, and my daughter ate it. She couldn't even stand and walk. Like, we were freaking out. We assumed what happened, so I called poison control, who asked me what my name was and what hospital I was heading to. And right when I told them, I got tinglies up my back. I was like, okay, what are they going to do at the hospital? Are they going to pump her stomach? And they said, no, they're just going to give her fluids and observe her. And I was like, okay, we're not going to the hospital. Like, I feel like there's a danger in them like thinking something and like calling CPS. Like even if we can explain what happened, like I don't trust them. So we sat in the parking lot of the hospital. I'm like, dude, we can do fluids and observation ourselves. So we sat in the parking lot of the hospital just in case, gave her fluids, gave her food, she threw up. She was fine after that. But like I haven't even had an involvement with the CPS, and I could totally understand the fear. Another time I'm in education, so we're mandated. That was mine. Sorry.
Okay. I was gonna say I still got feedback, but we're good now.
That no, it's a ding. It's my mindfulness bell that goes off, and I tried to turn it off, and I don't know how. Um, it's to remind me to relax, so I'm relaxing. Um, so as a teacher, I'm a mandatory reporter. So I have reported before, and CPS has done nothing or said that they need to have several
Reports.
complaints for one. Yeah, reports, which is totally understandable. Um, but a parent reported the school one time that I was working at and said that teachers wouldn't let their student leave the room, and that when he went back there, they saw the teachers kicking his kid, like kicking his kid through the chair or something. All of a sudden now CPS has all the time in the world. It was a week-long investigation with several interviews from because of this one report, and it's just so confusing to me because we have had reports of actual students saying abuse and it takes days to respond, and all of a sudden this parent is saying something, all of a sudden you have a week-long time for investigation, which is insane to me. So that's my perspective of and my obvious disdain for anything governmentally organized.
Just making lists. Well, and to further that, to the point you were making about Ayla, or whatever.
That's my daughter, by the way.
So your fear, your reasonable fear in that, and keeping her away from the hospital, and them telling you, yeah, she just needs fluids and observation, easy enough for anybody to take care of. If that, and then all of a sudden that could be used against you as not wanting to take care of her, and used as on top of the initial event already, and taking advantage of your fear and everything else to put you in a bad spot for literally no reason after she's good and everything's fine, and deterred you from taking her to a hospital and getting her the help she might have needed.
Yeah. Luckily, I mean, we were in the parking lot, so if anything happened, we were close. But
it's an immediate no-win situation. Immediate.
Yeah, exactly, and it happens that fast, like that fast. So, as I'm sure that Jennifer will explain better. Sorry, I'm having issues now that I wasn't organized with my headphones to begin with. I'm like catching on chords. So Jennifer, why don't you share with us who you are, where you're from, and your story?
Well, I'm in Florida, and my husband and I, this is the second family for both of us. We have grown kids. I have grandchildren that are older than my two babies. Got a second chance when I was 41. We had Kamani, and 2 years later we had Amaya. And a huge blessing. They're great kids. And a couple years ago, my husband got sick and spent 5 weeks in the hospital, almost died. We wound up losing everything, the house we were staying in. We wound up moving from a 4-bedroom house into a 20-foot camper. My husband was out trying to chop down the weeds on the property that we were moving to. Well, he was still using a walker and a wheelchair because he had an infection in his spine and had almost died from it. And so, tempers were a little hot, and he's also got PTSD from his time in the military. And I could tell at the end of one day that he had only been in the camper for maybe a week and a half. And tempers were a little touchy. So I was trying to get by him to get the car keys. I was going to take the kids for a ride, and with the PTSD, I crowded him, and he just grabbed me by the shoulders and turned me around and sat me in the tub. And I called the sheriff's department trying to get help for him because I had already had an incident where he woke up and didn't know where he was. He thought it was 2007 in Afghanistan. He didn't know who I was, who the kids were. So I was trying to get him help, and instead the sheriff's department said it's domestic violence, and they called the Department of Children and Families. They came out and talked to us, and once we explained the situation that, neither of us had anywhere to go or anybody, and if we'd have separated, he'd have been in a tent in the woods, and he still couldn't even bend over to put on his own shoes because his back was so messed up. He's like, oh, okay, not a problem. We'll work with you, give you services. Well, 4 days later at 10:30 at night, they showed up at our door, beating on the door, and took our kids. That was 18 months ago, and we've been fighting ever since. And it just, you try to do those services, and there's delays because of COVID. There's delays because the supervisor doesn't sign off on the referral for 3 weeks, or they send the referral to the wrong provider. But then they go to court and say, you're not trying to do what they're telling you to do. I can't write the referral for you. But the person that had them for a while, she had them from October of 2019 until October of last year. She decided Christmas of 2019 that visits were too much trouble and she didn't want to deal with it anymore. So we didn't get to see our kids for 6 months. And DCF allowed that. They weren't doing any visits because of COVID, and they kept telling the judge, well, they're having video visits. No, we're not. And we finally started getting visits again, and then they've taken those away because the transporter said we had a gun in our car, which we didn't. We don't even own a firearm. And so now we get video visits with a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old. Within 16 minutes, they're ready to get down. They don't want to talk.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you know, Jennifer, is that typical for them to take kids away in every domestic violence situation?
Pretty much from what I've seen, they try to split the families up. I'm in a lot of groups online, and most of the people will tell you that, they said I have to leave my husband or they're not giving me my kids back. And that sometimes, like I said, ours was a little bit of a different situation. It wasn't that he was just being ugly and trying to beat me up. That wasn't the case at all. And they don't want to hear that. They think everything is just evil, except them, and there's ones that are actually evil.
Do you think that your situation, your living situation, affected their perspective and changed any of their actions?
I think it did because, like I said, we moved out of a 4-bedroom house into a 20-foot camper, which since then we've been able to get a nicer one, a bigger one. But we'd only been in there like a week, and we're still trying to figure out where to put everything and what have you. So they were talking about, it was cluttered, and well, yeah, it was, because we didn't know where to put all those toys and clothes, and we stored a lot of stuff in a friend's barn, and it got ruined because it's out in the weather.
Yeah.
But
I have been concerned about that before, probably irrationally, but I'm a disaster just in general. So I always think that if my kids or if my ex-husband sees, he's gonna say I'm unfit or something, and that. I just don't think having a dirty house or a messy house is justification, because I believe, I wasn't there, so I can't say, but in my heart I feel like that did affect their actions, that you were living in a smaller home. If the same thing had happened to a millionaire living in a mansion, If the same exact thing had happened, would those kids be taken away?
I would say probably not, but then I also know people who are in the group with us, not the same situation, but because of, vindictive exes have been dealing with Child Protective Services for 3 years.
Yeah, I
So,
could see that.
but a lot of times they do take children from poverty because they don't have the money to fight.
Yeah, and
Yeah. And
I was just about to bring that up. It's a lot of times, and this is like all the time when dealing with the government, is that people talk about innocence and stuff, and really just being accused of something can be expensive. Like you're not necessarily going to jail per se or whatever else, but just being accused of something is expensive, which puts an undue financial burden on anybody in that situation. But obviously, as you were saying, I think it'd be more likely that if somebody had the money to get a lawyer, that it would just be handled more effectively.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, there's somebody in the group that his ex-wife didn't feel like dealing with sharing custody and visitation anymore, so she made one of those accusations. And for the past 3 years, he said over $100,000 in legal fees, and he still doesn't get to see his girl. So
I
I mean,
just want, if we look back at what we talked about last week, um, just to play devil's advocate, and we look at why this organization was created in the first place. So, like CPS, why CPS was created in the first place. And I think just like a lot of government institutions, like unions and things, they were started with good intentions.
exactly.
I think.
Yeah,
Because
definitely.
there are legitimately children out there who are being harmed, who are
Mhm.
living in environments that basically is a failure to thrive, where not even thrive, but a child is barely surviving. So CPS, if you think back, I just try to think back to before CPS may have been in an organization. I always just think like to the cowboy days. Like that's where my mind goes. Like
It's
I don't know
almost
why.
always been
I think
this way,
there's
right? Is that
yeah, there's no there's no government back then, and like children were beaten and probably like kept in closets and like things like this, and so I can see why it was created in the first place.
Yeah. And there are kids that need their help. And the sad thing though is, a lot of times those kids don't get that help. Like you said, they say, oh, well, we need multiple calls. I've seen people post online pictures of, where their grandkids or whatever. And there's a difference between clutter and just absolute living in a dump. And, when they post these pictures and you see a mattress, a stained mattress on the floor with piles of dog do and, just disgustingness. And they'll call and report these people, and they say, oh, well, they've got electricity, they've got food and water, so they're okay.
Yeah. There's no line of distinction. There's no rationale. That's what I think creates the fear is like you don't know, and it's so subjective to that one. They're not agents. What are they? Case
Investigators.
caseworker. Like there's it's so subjective. So that's where the fear comes from, is that could be me. Like I could be in that situation in the blink of an eye with one incident.
Yeah, and like you said, going to the hospital with your daughter, there's a hospital around here. It's a university hospital, and they pretty much they'll report any injury, even if it's explained. And
Yeah.
then you've got help. Or there's one young lady, and she took her child in, and he's got kidney problems, and they gave him the wrong medication. The hospital did. They gave him a certain type of antibiotic, and it sent him into renal failure. Well, DCF came in and took that baby from her, and they never even gave her a case plan. Within 3 months of taking him, they put in a petition to the court to terminate her parental rights. They won't give him to her family or anything else. And she's been fighting. He's a baby. He's 2 or 3 years old too. And it's just sad. And it's because the hospital made a mistake.
Wow.
It's so interesting. So I was a CASA worker, a court-appointed special advocate. So basically, my job was to be the voice of foster children in the court. I was just responsible for the children. And I don't want to say it's rhetoric, but the more I hear it, the more it feels like it was rhetoric, but that the goal of the court is to keep the family together. That's what was constantly told to me, is that the goal of the court is to keep the family together. But there's just, and again, I think there's a lot of people even in the system with good intentions, right? Even within the system, but that it's a broken system. It's a broken and probably overwhelmed system.
Yeah. Well, back, I believe it was Bill Clinton put in legislation, and the states get a bonus every time a child is taken. They get a couple $1,000s. They get more money every time a child is deemed as special needs for some reason. They get even more when a child is adopted out. So that's their paycheck. And I was watching, there's an attorney in California that does online shows trying to help parents. And he was interviewing a guy in Texas, and they were talking about it. And he said they've turned it into that's how they make their money. He said, not every case is about parenting, but everybody they refer for parenting classes. And why? Because the state only pays, X amount of dollars. Then they turn around and bill the federal government X plus Y, and they keep the difference. So, they turn it into their paycheck.
And comes back down to money. Everything comes back down to government. And when we talk about the government, it always leads back to money.
Yeah, and it flips everything on its head, and keeps these organizations from having a firm grasp on what their directive should be. So we can't even have a conversation about it with the organization, because it will never be in good faith, because that they have to stay alive. This is what they think they have to do. So it's not about what they're trying to accomplish. It's about job security and keeping the organization alive.
And this is what happens in education as well. And this is the reason I left the position I was in, is because it wasn't about educating kids anymore, because we had to keep the school open to educate kids. So it was all about the money, and it was all about the boxes we need to check and the data we need to move around, and like the things that we needed to do to keep the kids in their seats to get the money. And so education became about money. And it sounds like this is the same system. And again, even though the people in that system could have very good intentions, the people sitting at the table with me in that position had absolutely good intentions, and all started with a heart for kids, as I bet a lot of these people in this system have. And now here they are, basically tearing families apart.
Yeah. I've got a friend who, she had a 2-year-old, and she had a really bad experience having the 2-year-old at a hospital. So when she was pregnant again, she went to a midwife. And in Florida, they have usually if your baby's breech, they're taking you in for a C-section immediately. Well, she got down to the midwife, and the midwife decided to go ahead and deliver this baby, which, she had experience. The baby came out fine. The only problem, and I had never thought about it, when you come out breech, you've got a lot of hours of friction on some very tender areas. So the baby was a little bruised and swollen on her butt. So mom was concerned, and mom and dad and the other child and the midwife, they all loaded up in the car, stopped to get mom a hamburger because she had been in labor for quite a while, and went to the hospital to get the baby checked on. She gets to the hospital and they tell her, oh, well, you're not bleeding heavy enough to have just given birth. You must have stolen that child. There must be a dead mother in the hallway. And then they're looking at the baby. They said, and there's no way. This isn't from birth. Dad must be doing something nasty. Now, keep in mind, the midwife is with them. The midwife hasn't left their side in 5 hours. This baby's 5 hours old. And I've seen the pictures, and I don't care how sick of a person you are. You couldn't do that kind of damage in 5 hours because it had to be that continual pressure. And
Sorry.
they
I don't know how to make it stop.
Turn it off or put it in the other room.
They took her baby, and it took her 5 months to get them back. She had experts. She had a paid attorney. She had experts from Doctors Without Borders who have done hundreds of breech births and said this is perfectly normal. They went in for mediation, and the state said, no, we're going to trial. They went to go, and the state wanted to continue it. And when they finally got 2 days before trial, the state puts in the thing and says, oh, we don't have any evidence. You can have them back. Come get your kids. 5 months she fought for those babies, and then within a month later somebody's called about she posted a video online, and she's telling the 3-year-old, be easy, because she's 3 now, she just turned 3, be easy because the 3-year-old's wanting to play with her sister. And somebody called supposedly and said she was letting the 3-year-old hit the baby, so they're back out to investigate her, and she's terrified.
Yeah,
And
for good reason.
Yeah, but to me that says that somebody was a little pissed off that the state had lost, and they're kind of stalking her page, because there was nothing.
It's so hard because I know that there's instances where things are happening, but it's like there's no common sense. If I had harmed my own child or stolen a baby, why in the heckaroonie would I load up and take them directly to the hospital? You know what I mean? Like that doesn't show intent. There's no. It's like all investigative, like crime, like the stuff you see on crime shows where you have to have those things, right? The intent and the motive and the anyway. You know what I mean? Like all that goes out the window. It's like I wonder what training these people have. Because it doesn't sound like a lot.
No, I don't think so. And the good ones, we had a worker that was really good, and I think she cared too much because she was trying to ensure that we got visits and everything else. And one day she's there, the next day she's gone.
Wow.
Oh. Yeah, and like somebody said, somebody just put in the chat, the cases like Gabriel Fernandez, who was being abused despite reports to CPS from his teacher and a stranger at a business, and nothing was done. He was killed by his mother's boyfriend. Yeah, and that's what I don't understand. Like I said, that's multiple reports. Yeah. And probably, I would even bet not even an investigation.
Probably not.
On that account. And yet, like, it just, none of it makes sense, which again, because of the chaos and that nothing makes sense. And we're talking about chaos in a system that's responsible for children, to keep families together. Like this, it shouldn't be allowed. The system should look at itself and say, like, okay, how do we fix it? Like, how do we fix it?
Well, it should be, I mean, breaking up families should be the absolute last resort. There should be investigations. And, I mean, things like Monique's talking about with Gabriel Fernandez are going to happen. And, I mean, you have to kind of decide where you're going to err on and how many people's kids you can take away from their families to justify whatever percentage of accidents or actual neglect and things are happening. So there is I guess to play devil's advocate, there is a balance that you have to consider. But I mean, you're right. When the government's involved, these investigations are heavily lopsided and don't actually seem to be effective or take anything meaningful into consideration.
Yeah, and they're not trained. And then again, now we add money to the table, and it skews everything. Yeah. And another point is that these children are taken away and put into foster homes. And Jennifer sent me, and then I've read and seen, and I'm actually listening to a book right now, which randomly came up on my like you should read this list, um, about kids in foster homes that are abused or not not even maybe to the point of abuse, but not treated right and not living in conditions that they would even allow the parents,
Mhm.
to have. And again, we're talking money. We're
Yeah.
talking these people get money to have these kids live in their house, and a lot of times that's what it's for. But that's another part of the system that I don't understand is how these people can get this permission to have, you know what I mean? It's because they're desperate, because they've taken so many children away that they need all these children to have a place to stay.
Yeah. And I don't remember what the numbers were, but I read an article about how few foster parents they actually take the license away from, how few investigations are actually done in spite of all the reports that are made against the foster home. Because they don't want to investigate their own.
Yeah.
They brush that under the rug. And I think I had sent you the article about the little baby. She was what, 20 days old? And the
Yeah.
foster home, she had 12 fractures. How? At 3 weeks old. How?
Yeah.
And, the parents never got a chance to be with their child, and it's sad.
Yeah. And I just don't I the book I'm reading, the parents that were foster kids basically put on a show every time, there was a social worker there or something. So I can see how that could happen. But it just seems like a lot. Like I've seen foster parents too have a really high number of foster children in their house. And somebody said that foster parents in Florida get less than it costs to board your dog for a month. So they're
Yeah.
not getting a significant amount of money to take
They
care of
don't.
these children. That's
I mean, they get
interesting.
and Medicaid and an allowance for clothing and stuff like that. But as far as cash, they don't. So they do try to take in quite a few kids.
Say how would but oh, so that's why they take in so many. Because I was thinking like, why do it then? Like I can't comprehend if you're gonna harm a child, like why do it? Like, and how is
Yeah.
that not noticed? Maybe they should go through some psychological tests like you do when you go to the police force or something. But you think of all those parents that are trying to adopt and like have to jump through 8 bazillion hoops for so many months and loving families who want to adopt, and yet it seems like the foster care system is not quite up to par.
And like I said, the whole system needs an overhaul. It really does. It's sad, and the kids are the ones that suffer. And
Yeah.
it's like, and so many people that I'll read about, and it's like the caseworker will get mad and they'll retaliate and they take away your visits or something. And who are they hurting? Yeah, they're hurting me, but they're hurting the
Yeah.
child. You know,
Yeah.
like
And that
grow
sounds,
up.
yeah, that sounds like a case of a worker who is disconnected from their
Yeah.
purpose, who has lost their sole purpose, which they probably started with, because this happens with a lot of teachers too. You start because you want to change lives and educate kids, and you get so disenfranchised and like angry and bitter and like that you do things like that, which are super childish and also super harmful. Uh, and 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 so we can go back if we want to look at the system. If I compare it to the education system, what's being done for these workers, these social workers who go in, day out, and see these things happening to kids, right? And so I see it happen 10 times, right? And you're the 10th. And in 9 of those, it was actually happening. And so I'm going to assume that 10th time. You know what I mean? I see it so much that I'm going to assume that it's true. I'm going to
Yeah.
assume there's negligence because I've seen it so much. Instead of assuming the positive, I'm always going to assume the negative. Like Aaron said, like, where do you want to err on the side of, I guess?
Right.
Uh, Katie said, I work for a parenting education agency in Florida. We don't bother trying to bill our local child welfare agency. There's too much paperwork. We rely on local philanthropy to support parents. Yes, there's a place for child welfare, but we often advocate for the parents.
And that's awesome. And we've actually, that's where we're doing our classes. The agency that we're working with is not hand in hand with DCF. But originally we had done, they send you to Meridian, which is basically a state-run mental health place. And you go there and they're like, oh, well, you don't need this service, but they sent you here, so we're going to go ahead and make you take it anyway.
Wow.
They literally told my husband that. And he's like, wow, really? So, you and when they did my mental health evaluation, they were like, well, are you having trouble sleeping? Are you having trouble eating? And I'm like, yeah, at times I do. I go into Walmart and I'll see my kid's favorite snack and I'll cry. 18 months later, I'll break down in the middle of Walmart. Those are my babies. They're like, oh, well, we think you might be a little bit depressed. Do you think?
Wow.
Yeah, I think.
If you
I think
weren't depressed,
I wasn't.
yeah.
Yeah. So, and what does that leave you? It leaves you with you and your spouse. You're the only person you have that you can trust to vent to is your spouse, and you're together all the time, and then you wind up at each other's throats because you're both so aggravated and you both want something done because these are your kids. And then you wind up arguing, and it's a no-win situation then. And, my husband and I, we've done that. We've argued several times, and it wouldn't have happened if the kids weren't here. If they were home, it wouldn't have, because we wouldn't be under that stress.
Yeah.
And it sounds like the support that the system is trying to give you is very superficial. Like,
Yeah.
almost like traffic, like, what is when you get a ticket and you have to go to class, traffic class.
Oh, driving school?
Yeah.
Driving
Right.
school. Yeah. Yeah. Like, no, what is really that's going to teach someone to drive better? Like, that's so superficial. So that's what it sounds like. It's like, okay, we have to give you some consequence. So let's just do this.
Yeah. Well, I mean, my counselor that I talk to weekly, he actually used to be a DCF worker. And he told me straight out, he said, you can't trust anybody, not even me. He said, the only person you can trust is Justin. Because everybody else, we've got a duty to report everything. So, if I go in and I'm like, man, I really want to strangle my husband this week because he's on my nerves, they're going to twist that and turn it in.
Yeah.
And don't ever use the word argue in front of one of them because, oh my God, I'm like, no, I need to argue with somebody over a parking spot. That doesn't mean I'm punching him in the face. It just means having a verbal disagreement. But they twist your words like that.
I could totally see that. Yeah, and then then you're afraid to say anything.
Yeah.
Because everything is wrong. And and again, it's because it's a system and a broken system at that. Katie said she's the one who works for the parent advocacy in Florida. She said they can't legally take away your visits. Call their supervisor. We have seen more issues with visits during COVID.
The supervisor that's taking hours away.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel too like it's so much human tendency, like human tendencies to if I have an altercation with you or I'm annoyed by you, all of a sudden you're already in the boat where you can't do anything right. And instead of separating my emotion from it, because my job is to get you back to your kids. And probably because I'm overwhelmed, I have 8,000 cases, I am annoyed by you. So now all of a sudden my emotions are affecting decisions I make about a family.
Yeah. Well, and they're not getting blind compliance. So if you try to stand up for yourself, they have that position of authority. And a lot of times, and you see it in all different government agencies, where as soon as you assert yourself in any way, they will escalate immediately because you're challenging the authority they have, and that's not permissible behavior.
Yeah, and I'm a very emotional person anyway. I speak with my heart. My heart's on my sleeve, and my attorney, my husband, everybody, basically in court, they'll be like, "Shut up, let me handle it." I come across wrong, but I'm just trying to get all my feelings out, and it just.
And you probably think with more of a rational mind, like I'm trying to explain to you, like, why can't you see how insane this is and how detrimental, and I can feel how I would feel, like, to be so frustrated that they just can't see, like how could this be legal and allowed in the United States of America? You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's all 50 states. The one video that I had shared with you where Vincent Davis, the attorney in California, was talking to the attorney in Texas. The guy in Texas said that the particular county he's in, as soon as they take your children away, that very first day they file for termination of parental rights.
Wow.
In every single case in that county. How?
The goal should be reunification of families.
And that's what they say the goal is. That I guarantee you. I don't know if I can't guarantee you, but I bet that outwardly and verbally that's what they say, that our goal is to unify families.
Well, that action is totally counter to that. If you're immediately filing, that's insane.
But nobody knows that, probably. Nobody knows the behind the scenes of what's actually happening. And why would you do, like, what? I'd love to know. We need to get someone from CPS on here, because I would love to.
Sorry.
Good luck.
I want to know the reasoning. I want to know the cause, because because I compare it to education, and from the outside you can see, like, why are they making these decisions? That's insane, and no. But if you look at the reasoning why, they're not good reasons, mind you, but you can see the thinking behind the decision that was made, right? You can see that. So I'd love to know the thinking behind these decisions that are being made. I would bet it all leads back to money. That's what I would bet. Or ease of the system. I doubt very highly it leads back to an authentic caring of supporting families and keeping them together.
No, it doesn't. And a lot of it is the power and control as well. One of the last, they used to bring our kids to the town that we live in, to a friend's house for us to visit. And one time they sent a transporter to pick up the kids, and she was young. She was like barely pregnant with her first child. So she came to pick up a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old with one infant car seat. And I said, no, both of them need car seats, and that one's not even sufficient for the 2-year-old. She's, oh, okay, let me go back to the office. Well, she comes back and she's got 2 infant car seats. I said, those are not going to fit my children. And they had an hour drive to go back. So she goes back and comes back a third time, and she had a bigger infant car seat. I guess, maybe for special needs. It was still rear facing, and I could put my daughter in that. And she had one I could squeeze my son into. But she was on the phone with her supervisor, and my husband, she wasn't even on a speaker, but my husband overheard the supervisor screaming in her ear, I don't care what the parents say. You are there to pick up those children, and you're going to pick them up. Well, no, you're not taking my kids if it's not safe.
Because they just assume. She probably just assumed you were being combative.
Yeah, and it's like, no. And, we report that to the attorneys and everything else, and nothing ever gets done. And that's the thing. They go into court, and the attorneys, oh, yeah, we hear this, and we're going to say this. And they go to court, and they just roll over like a dog wanting their belly rubbed. Oh, okay, we'll just do whatever.
Have you guys been able to get any of those interactions like on video and recording any of that at all?
Not usually. I've got some things in text from the supervisors and what have you, but I haven't gotten anything on video with them because usually I'm just, like in that particular case, I was spending time with my kids. And it wasn't the young girl's fault. I was able to take her and show her the National Highway Transportation Safety Board website and teach her about car seats. She's like, oh, I'm so grateful because I'm about to have, I'm 3 months pregnant with my first baby. So she was grateful. But the supervisor was just looking at, no, it's time to take the kids, and they're going. I don't think she lasted long as a transporter. She said she had been there a week and she hated it already.
Wow.
So,
I can imagine. I wouldn't want to be part of that system either.
Well, and it's worth noting when we were talking about it being all 50 states that the problem is not isolated to the United States. And one of the most interesting things I saw when I was doing a little bit of research is that Norway seems to be having an issue as well, where they're over enforcing and failing to provide support to reunify families as well.
Norway is usually at the top of our list of like great countries for all the things that we talk about. Really? Oh, I'm in shock.
So it's not, and I mean, I think it illustrates a little bit like the difficulty of the position everybody's in this case, because I mean, it's hard to know what to do. But if you're not working toward the reunification of families, no matter what, it's like, here's the issue. This is what's going on. This is what you need to do so we can get your kids back with you. And that should just be it. And if you don't meet these requirements, assuming they're reasonable requirements and everything else, because obviously being in transition and moving is not a good reason for anybody to have any judgment at all, because people move. But the goal should be just that end goal, the reunification of families, and especially with natural parents. They should have ultimate rights.
And like the judgments you make on a family that have had their children taken away shouldn't be any different. Like there are families where 4 kids sleep in a room, right? That's a thing. But if you're a family who's had a kid taken away, now all of a sudden 4 kids sleeping in a room is not okay. You know what I mean? Like they're held to some higher ridiculous standard. And what does it matter? A kid doesn't need their own room. A kid doesn't need, all these things to have a loving, thriving home. Katie said, for balance, I would say that I know many child welfare workers that have great intentions and work to support keeping families together or reunification. However, we do see some of these heartbreaking stories. And that's what I was saying. I think they all start with good intention. And even those that have good intentions are probably blocked and prevented by the system. And
I think it's kind of like politics. A lot of them go in, you see them in local government, and they've got real good intentions. And they get up to the state, and they start getting a little more corrupt, and then they get to Washington, and it's just, they're blown out of the water. It's either you do it our way or you're out. And I think that's what happens with a lot of the workers.
And they get overwhelmed.
Yeah, they do.
Every social worker I know, like I went to school for a hot minute to be a social worker, and heard just horror stories that you're working 60 to 80-hour weeks for basically very little pay, but you're in there because you felt called. But then again, you start to become like, okay, whatever, you're the 10th parent I've dealt with today. I'm gonna assume like you're just the same as all the other 9, and we're gonna, because we have so many, we're gonna prescribe you this prescription to
Yep.
save you and make you a better parent in our eyes, right? And then you can have your kids back.
Yeah. And the bad thing though is once they take your kids away, they make every problem worse. You know, if you had issues with depression, now you're more depressed. If you've had issues with addiction, now you're going to turn to that more, not
Yeah.
less. You know, and I read, and I can't find it, but I read a really interesting post by a lady who was talking about that. You know, you take my child away because I have a problem, and now what am I going to do? I'm going to turn right back to that. So, you know, there's ways to do things because, like in our situation, I mean, my husband's never put his, he's never even spanked our children. You know, our children were not in any kind of danger, and they could have left them home, and we could have done the same services.
Yeah, and they could have used less of their resources. There could have been constant checks and
Yeah,
even the doctors visits or whatever if that need to happen, and psychologists and stuff, with again less resources, less foster care.
yeah. And you know, when the caregiver quit letting us see our kids for a while, when we finally got to see them again, and the our son, he's like, "Oh my God, I thought y'all didn't love me anymore." So here we had been trying to call, and she just wouldn't answer. She wouldn't let us see him, and you know, it's heartbreaking. But on the other hand, he's got the faith. That child who look at you and he'll say, "It's okay." She just knows. And I just keep thinking that God's not going to let that baby go without answering his prayers.
And you recently went back to court.
Yeah. We had a hearing in March, and they were going to ask for termination because the case has been going on so long, even though a lot of the delays were due to COVID. And but they found out that our attorneys hadn't been invited to any of these meetings where they had changed our visitation or taken it away. So they said, okay, well, we need a 30-day continuance so that we can have a staffing, an in-house meeting. Well, we had court scheduled for this past Wednesday, the 7th. The staffing was scheduled for the 9th. So when we go to court on the 7th, all they did was say, oh, we haven't had our meeting yet, so we need to continue it again. We've known for 30 days that you needed to discontinue it. You know, that you needed the staffing, so why didn't you schedule it before then? And the judge just lets it go and says, oh, okay, put it off again.
Like there's no urgency because it's just systematic. It's the system's more, not more important, but the system is what's looked at instead of case by
There's no
case. It's
stakes
kind
for
of
them.
like, yeah, and it's not individualized. It's like it's clumped. Like someone said, most of the time the prescriptions don't fit the disease. So what they say needs to be done, and that's exactly what happened in education, which is why individualized education has become such a big thing. Um, but you would, again, it would have to be a reframe of the whole system, because you would have to, like in cases like your case, you would have to change the prescription so that you're using less resources for people who don't need it as much, so that you can individualize what each family needs.
Yeah,
And
and
if that's your goal, then that's what you should want to do, if that's your goal. If
yeah, and unfortunately, sometimes it just seems like it's not. But then, you know, you go into court before COVID, they were doing in-person court. We would see some things that would shock us. You know, my husband and I went in, and I can't remember how many kids this one family had, but the attorneys went up front and they're like, oh well, you know, the parents are going to agree to sign off and terminate the rights on this child, but they're going to fight for this child. And I'm like, whoa, wait a minute, how could you do that? People like that need to be in the system. Those kids probably all need to be gone. If you don't want your children that bad, then you don't need any of them.
Yeah.
But then you've got others that are in there fighting. We knew a girl that fought for her kids for 3 years, and she finally got them back. And a month after she got them back, they were at school, and she had went somewhere, and she randomly got killed. And here she had been away from the kids for 3 years. She had them back for months.
Wow.
Wow.
But so many people want their kids back, and they're just fighting an uphill battle.
Yeah.
And it's I would like to say, like, again, and we lead back to the fear. And if it was an authentic system, if we could say these people and this system is working for a good cause. Let's say I was on the other side of it. Let's say I was part of the system, and I say we have a purpose. There are kids that are being hurt. There are kids that are unwanted. We need to be doing this work. If that was the case, then if you're fighting for your kid, that means something. You know what I mean? Yeah, it's just a broken system all around. That's what Monique said. Broken system all around, and the children end up suffering. And let's think about these children that are then going to grow up. You know what I mean? Like, there's effects, whether they're taken away for a day or for 3 years. Now these kids there's effects from this, and I bet they don't get the support that they need. You took them away. You potentially caused this situation. Yes, something on my side might have instigated the situation, but you perpetuated it. You amplified it. And now my kids have had emotional harm and need support. Where are you now? Where are you now?
Yeah, and it's like our son, he's never had behavior issues. And the last couple months, he started acting up. And he told us on video the other day, he said, I got in trouble a lot at school this week. And his dad was like, why, Kamani? He said, I just want to come home. But, and we spend most of our time on video with them, either trying to get their attention because they're 2 and 4. Obviously, they don't
babies.
Video. They're sitting at a table, they're eating, they've got 12 coloring books in front of them, they're arguing over who gets the blue crayon. So we're either trying to get their attention or we're trying to correct their bad behavior, like he's trying to climb across the table to get the crayon he wants. Where if we don't address that, then we're wrong. But it's gotten to a point where I hate to say it, I dread visits because I know they're not enjoying them.
Yeah.
And my husband, we're not supposed to be on video at the same time. And we can't. The first time they did it, I would do like 15 minutes, and then I would give him the phone. We'd switch back and forth. But we're not allowed to do that either. I have to do my visit and then hand him the phone, and I'm done. And then they want to give us both of our hours back to back. Well, like I said, you're lucky if you get 15 minutes. And my husband, he says, I know how hard it is for you, so you go first. And I don't want to do that every week. I don't want to take that from him. And this past week, my daughter, she turned into a real daddy's girl. As soon as I got on video, she goes, I want my daddy. So she was pouting the whole time. She's so cute. And I can't be mad at her. And I would rather give up my time and let her have her daddy because that's what she wants. And I don't want them to get to where they dread visits that bad,
Did they say why you can't be on video at the same time?
Well, because we've argued. Well, we don't argue in front of our kids. Y'all have created arguments, yeah, because every time they mess with our visits, we usually wind up, like I said, you have nobody else to vent to. So you wind up arguing with each other, but it's not in front of our kids. It's not at visits because I don't care how mad at him I am. If once the visit's that's it, I'm focused on my kids. I get to be ready to murder you, and I'm not going to take away time from my kids.
So you've never argued at a visit, and yet because you've argued before,
Yeah.
If you're in a relationship and you haven't argued, just BTW, you might have an issue.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if they can't get under your skin, you obviously don't care very deeply about them. I mean, some random stranger is not going to upset me to the point that I'm going to have an argument with them because I don't care about you that much. You're not important in my day to day life.
Yeah. Again, I think we've come to where I would bet many of these people in the system, in CPS, in DCF, have or had good intentions. And I even think the system was created under good intentions, but it's become big and broken. As my personal opinion, the bigger something gets, the more broken it becomes. And I think that's what we're seeing.
Yeah, as it gets
And
further away from the people in the communities that it's trying to help.
as you've said, yeah, is there something, Jennifer, that you've run across that people can do? Is there an organization or anything that people can support families?
Not really. I haven't come across anything. I mean, basically, the parents have created support groups in ourselves, and some states don't even give the parents attorneys, which Florida, we're lucky to have that. But, so the parents are out there saying, hey, check out this federal law or check out this or try, try doing this in court. But
Which
other
is
than that,
crazy that information is hidden. Our goals are the same. Our goals should be the same. Our goal is to reunify your family. There should be no hidden laws. There should be no like court cases where we're trying to trickaroo or like, you know what I mean? Like this is not not a normal case. I shouldn't have to know all the laws. You should tell them to me.
exactly. That's just like they're not supposed to be able to come in and take your children without a warrant unless it's an actually emergency situation. But so many times they do it because the parents don't know that
Don't
they have a
know.
right to tell them no in that situation.
Well, Annika, it's probably like,
So,
am I freezing or
No,
is she
it's not.
freezing?
It's just her. We
So I'll
we,
talk with you.
we might have lost you, Jennifer.
Are
I
we?
don't know if you can hear us.
But it's just like you said, Aaron, whenever you stand up for yourself, they then you're in trouble more. So like when they say they want you to take a breathalyzer for DUI, right? Like just by saying no, you have the right to say no, but then you're already incriminated and you go to jail then. So really, do you really have a right? I don't know how to tell Jennifer we lost her. Oh, I could tell her on. Is she back?
No, she just dropped
Oh.
off the call,
Oh, okay. She might hop back
Yeah.
on.
and I'll try to adjust here for when that happens. What were you saying?
I was just saying, even though you have the right to say no,
Oh yeah,
you can't take my child without a warrant. Just by saying no, you're causing them to get their feathers ruffled.
yeah, and those are people who shouldn't be in positions of authority, and it kind of coincides with all of the debate that we're having now as a country about law enforcement, and there's not a whole lot that you can do, but videotape and don't talk to anybody is
Yeah, because you can't. Yeah, and I think, and like she said, like you don't think of videotaping because you're thinking of your kids.
yeah.
But it's sad. And probably in the same situation with police. Like you're scared you're gonna get arrested, so you don't think of videotaping. Oh, she says she thinks her connection may be too weak. I think we were extra delayed today too. Like comments I think are like way behind. What should
I
I
didn't see any issues.
oh, it's 8:05.
Yeah, that's a crappy way to go. We'll have to
I know.
get back with her. Here, let me jump over here. But yeah, I mean, it reinforces the point that, and it's got to be. They say, and they were talking about during, and that's not true in most states. You can videotape, especially government officials, and especially in Florida. Smith v. Cumming gives everyone the right to record and look into it. This is not legal advice, but the court found that everyone has the right to film public officials in the execution of their duties.
And you said that it's for every state?
That was in the Court of Appeals for whatever Florida's in, whatever circuit Florida's in.
Oh, okay. So you can in Florida.
Yeah, I wasn't prepared to talk about that, so I don't have any. I don't have any
Oh.
notes. I don't have any notes. That's why I'm saying.
We'll come back at you. I'm just gonna walk around with my camera on. You should be able to record anyone. Anybody can record me. I should be able to record anyone.
Yeah, when
and
you're
if
in public.
Yeah, and if you say I can't record you, that's pretty shady. Like, why?
And Katrina, you're right. It seems that it does provoke, but all the more reason to do it, because then you have actual evidence that it's happening, and let's normalize it as well at the same time, so that it doesn't provoke in the future. Because we're not going to change anything by not changing, right? But always, and during the BLM stuff, there were a lot of resources going around on the internet about having an emergency button on your phone that immediately brings up your camera, so that you're always in a position to be able to live stream what's going on if you end up in a bad spot, in a bad situation. And things like that are helpful to have for everybody, because you never know what's going to happen.
I was gonna say, and you never know until you know. Like,
Yeah.
I would blow my past self's mind to even think. To me, I always thought if you got in a situation, even this situation, but this is obviously before I had kids, even this situation with parents or a situation with the law, I'm like, okay, well, what'd you do? Right? Like, were you combative? Like, were you reaching somewhere you weren't supposed to? What'd you do? That would be my first thought. And now in this world, and since I had kids in that whole pain pill thing, I'm like, it doesn't matter. Like, you could do something and it could be misconstrued, or you could it doesn't even matter what you do.
Yeah.
So always be ready. Like, I don't know. I can't decide if I would start recording. Like, I still have that
reticence,
authority figure, like, fear in me, I think.
Yeah, and I'd be lying if I said I would definitely hesitate for a long period of time. Intellectually, it's easy for me to resolve all of that, but I get caught up in those kind of situations, and you don't. That's why I keep repeating it so much. It's just as much for me as I feel like it's for anybody else. Always film everything when you interact with the government. I just keep repeating it to when I'm in that position, that maybe my brain will stop and think, oh yeah, now's the time.
Maybe
now's
I should
the time
film
to do
this.
It.
Yeah. Agreed. Jennifer just said, I asked if she had any closing remarks. Her internet is not is weak, is not getting back on. She said, I just want that people need to be aware, and if they see a family in this situation, don't assume, try to help them. And I think that is a really good point, because I could even see myself making assumptions about a family whose children have been taken away and whose CPS has been called in, even knowing my fear of my children being taken away at the time. Like, I mean, it could have happened so easily. At the time we were living in my mother-in-law's house, a 2-bedroom house, 5 of us. My oldest was sleeping in the living room behind the couch, and my youngest was in the kitchen in a playpen. Like, can you imagine what CPS would have thought? We were fine. We were there to save money.
Yeah.
Like, look at tiny living nowadays. Get over it. Like, everybody was fine. Everybody, you know what I mean? There was not a big deal. And we literally had plenty of money. We could have been living on our own, but we made a decision to sacrifice. But CPS would have seen, oh, look, your kids don't even have rooms. They're taking drugs. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
gone. Gone, just like that. I'm so glad I didn't go to the hospital that day. I can't lie.
Me too. I'm sure you probably told me that story before, but my memory doesn't work.
But now it just is so it's so much more impactful now.
Yeah.
Like I really think it could have happened. Like back then I probably thought I was being a little paranoid, but now that I think about our living situation at the time, like it really could have happened. And with Ayla and all her injuries and like broken up lips and swollen jaws and like they could have easily thought that something bad was happening. Like that's just crazy.
And then there's nothing you can do except fight. And but yeah, I mean, it's just like we talk about all the time. It's all the more reason to not make assumptions, to have conversations in these sorts of scenarios, and to be open first and foremost. Obviously, don't let bad things happen around you, but get information, be informed before you do anything, even if it's calling calling DCF on your neighbors or CPS on your neighbors. Like try to get whatever information you can before
Don't
hearing
assume.
if you hear screaming and what sounds like a beating and then jump to conclusions, because then I mean you could
Yeah.
ruin that family's life
You could
to
life.
find out that
Yes.
they were playing Wii.
Yeah.
I mean,
Legit. Yeah, don't assume. And assume the best intentions and wait to be proven wrong. Which is really sad that we have to say that because again, there are children really being harmed. Like you said, it's that line. Everybody's wishing Jen the best. We also wish you the best, Jen, sending you all kinds of positive vibes and pray that you get your children back soon. Let us know how it goes so we can let the viewers know.
yeah, and thank you for
Monique says-
sharing your story. I know it's probably not easy, but I'm glad that you're getting it out there so that more people can be aware of these things happening, to be able to be in a better position for themselves and their families as well if it happens.
Yeah, and know they're not alone.
Yeah.
And know you're not alone. Like she said, there are a lot of groups that she's on. Monique said, yeah, her toddler son hurt himself all the time. She was afraid that people would think he was abused. Yep.
Yeah. It sounds like an Ayla.
It's yeah, right? Her face was like swollen. She like jumped off the slide into a rocking chair at daycare. Like, who does that? Yeah, and yeah, keep up the fight, and it's sad we have to fight against all these systems, but like Aaron said, record when you can.
Yeah, so thanks everybody for being here. I know this was a heavy one. And I don't even know what to say. Like I don't even know like what to point anybody towards to help. Like it seems
Go to the parent advocacy groups, I think, are a good place to start when you're in this situation, and get support from as many people as you can. I think so that like she said, that depression doesn't just turn into deeper depression, addiction doesn't turn into deeper addiction. That's all we can do, because right now we're fighting against something more big and powerful that has control.
and it takes the time and money that we don't necessarily have.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Totally.
lots of Facebook groups. It's one of the redeeming qualities of social media. And I'm
Agreed.
glad that you were able to find them and get help like that, because I honestly can't even imagine. Like it's not often.
I
I'm
can
speechless.
imagine. Yeah. Right. Next week We are talking to a mother who has a son who is autistic. So we're talking about living with autism, basically, and the perspective on the life of that.
Yeah, and thank you guys for being with us tonight. Please like and comment, subscribe so you don't miss out on any of the videos and stuff, and tell your friends, please. We'd like to get a bigger audience so we can bring more attention to situations like these, to the best of our ability, and to get people having these conversations within their family and stuff. So we'll see you next week, and until then, have meaningful conversations. Thanks, guys.